Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Getting a little bit back into the rhythm of things. Last week I finally put out the much long-awaited Pagos Thoughts video that I'd waited about a week and a half to even put out. And there's some other videos that I'm gradually coming up with ideas with and kind of bringing myself to do. It's been a very rough time for me personally for the past few weeks, which is why you haven't seen a whole lot of videos out of the channel. And even some inconsistencies with the videos that you normally see, such as State of the Realm not always making it onto iTunes or Android, even though I swear I've done it. I then realized, no, I never did it. I just thought I did it. So apologies for that over the past few weeks. Hopefully over the next couple of weeks with some new stuff popping up, we'll be able to get a little bit more into the rhythm of things. There's content I want to make for games that are not Final Fantasy 14, but I'm having just right now, just unwinding a little bit. So even the 14 content's kind of gone down a little bit on the YouTube side of things. I got ideas and I do want to get those out to you guys, so apologies and thank you to those of you who have been supporting over the last few weeks. Speaking of people who have been supporting over the last few weeks, over on Patreon, of course, we always have to thank these people because they combat hashtag demonetize, and I can't help but feel really bad when they support me over there and then I don't create a whole lot of videos in a given month. But I've received a lot of supportive messages from a lot of the people who support over on Patreon. And I do want to thank you if you did send me one for those as well. Or over on Twitch chat, I've received a few comments about that as well. So, of course, let's thank our sponsors over on Patreon. We have our patron of light, Khuja Cross on Jenova. He's been a massive supporter. You guys will see an image on the screen right now. Massive supporter over the last few months and has sent me a lot of very heartwarming messages letting me know that, you know, I should take some time for myself. And I really do appreciate that. So, patron of light, thank you for going above and beyond as you always have. Khuja Cross on Jenova. Then, of course, we have all of our other sponsors who have been awesome supporters as well. We have Remil Gaming. These are our standard sponsors. Remil Gaming, Sabo Empire, Jesus, I can't even pronounce things. Red Wings of the Baron FC on Zalera, Fray Blackheart, Cidus Oreo on Shiva, Syd Hellwind of Gilgamesh, Afro Ninja from Malboro, Cheesecake from Leviathan, Sploda, That Lame Weeb, Ashen Emiya of Cerberus, Argoti Tristam of Midgardsormr, Fafarian, Rendil, Giraffeswillrule, Stevie-Rex, and Neon. We have our elite sponsors. We have, and by the way, there's a few new sponsors on the list. If you didn't provide me a name, I generally just grab like a shortened version of your name since I don't like to repeat people's full real names over here on Patreon. So if you did pledge over the last week or so and you would like a different display name, be sure to send me that message when you hear it here. So again, for elite sponsors, we have Shinka, we have Crimson and Talvia Swift of Coworld, we have Just One Fox, we have Shadow Link on the Tomberry server, we have Dom, we have Asuka Wake from the Jenova server, we have Lemillion of Midgardsormr, we have Sarah and the Avalanche family on Malboro, we have Janhyua Yotsuyu. I actually have a name here that I think got moved to another spot. Actually, I think they got moved to standard sponsor. And I'll confirm that here while I'm reading off the rest of the names. We have Kifkin the Great Eagles on Exodus, Darkraver, Katayoshi from Khuja, Skia Symphonia from Ragnarok, Rah Xephon from Exodus, Rynoet Westos the Purple Warrior, Edric Red Steel on Exodus, Lexxie Valentine, Mantaru the Rivivus FC from Zodiac, Sour Cream and Tribes from Jenova, Rynoet Chikara, Goetia Valfer of Siren, Hirschverse of Fairy, Phoenix Down FC on Goblin, and Saren from Zodiac. Let me just get a hard confirmation. I'll leave it in the video. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, and I missed this. Welcome to LA. I missed the standard sponsor of Nyrek and Kaya Amatsuki of Midgardsormr, so apologies to you. Making sure to get that back on the list. And then we have our premium sponsors. We have Sean, we have Kana Uzuki on the Jenova server, we have Yu Starla on Coworld, we have Sathal, Sarah Frost from Behemoth, Diablo, Holy Tabasco, Red Thorn Nasura, Kernai Oni, Askenhawk, Crass, 015, Mustang, the Serenity FC on Ultros, Kat Kazuma, Serial Killer on Cactar, Ignis Fairgun from Diablos, Valestra Fanfrit, Knock Quarters from Excalibur, Corvus Moonscar, Private Mikey, Spike, Nadia Kirasami, Rudy Rudiger, Tim Colossus, Kill Hackman, Rawl Jr., and Kiltastic Jones. Thank you to all of you who have been supporting over the last few weeks, and I promise over the next few months we'll have plenty of video content on the channel. But anyway, we got about 14 questions, it looks like, over on the forums, so we're not going to be doing Twitch side questions this week at all because I was like losing my voice midstream today, so let's get started with the questions on the forums. All right, question number 1. Hey, Mr. Happy, how are your wrists feeling? Hear that? That's 10 years from now, me hating myself. It's just a little crack. They're doing all right. I haven't done a lot of Pagos, just trying to stick to mostly the challenge log right now since I don't really need the weapon, and I'm also waiting to see what kind of adjustments they're going to make. We have more adjustments coming this week, including some hot fixes, so probably some bug fixes specifically with the chain. The chain problem, since they have identified a problem with the chain bonuses not continuing, having to do with pets landing the final hit. So actually, that's where my question is going to be leading. How come you don't give your wrist a break by switching back and forth between mouse and keyboard and controller every hour or two? I know you can play on controller because I remember saying the Let's Play series. I don't like switching constantly. If anything, I just kind of want to play the whole time on controller because that does a lot for me. Normally, I don't get wrist pain like any other content in the game that isn't Pagos. And probably if I wasn't playing tank or healer even in Pagos, it probably wouldn't be that bad. But something about Pagos, just I guess the frequency, because I mostly play roles like tank and healer in there, it just ends up putting a little bit of strain. I guess it's probably where my DPS keybinds are, which, for example, Stone, all my DPS keybinds for White Mage are on control modifier, so like control 2, control 3, control 4. And so maybe it's just that angle of reaching for control and 4 and stuff like that, especially Stone 4, since that's the one I'd be spamming the most in the case of playing White Mage there. So no particular reason why I don't swap back and forth. Honestly, I should just play the whole time in Pagos on controller and just eliminate having to go back and forth in the first place. All right, question number 2. Hey, Mr. Happy, how is the temperature in LA? It's actually, the temperature hasn't been too bad. It's been a little more humid than usual. So temperature okay, but odd amount of humidity here in LA. SE gave us a fun jump puzzle with the Moonfair event, and now that's 3 different kinds of content we've got for seasonal event that are a limited time only. Why are the Halloween special dungeon, the Valentine special maze, and the Moonfire Fair not allowed in the Gold Saucer as an addition, given the Gold Saucer has yet to have any updates in like forever? Should these fun seasonal events be lost to players didn't get the chance to enjoy them at the time they were available? The main thing that I like about the seasonal events being these special events is there's something to look forward to. Generally, when something's always available, there's almost no sort of onus to do it ever. If there's something in the Gold Saucer that you can do that would reward something better, you'll just go do that instead. You know, I feel like if you put those in the Gold Saucer, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I'm never going to go do it. When it comes around for the events and I can earn something that, you know, is kind of on a clock, I feel a little bit better about it personally, but that's from someone who plays the game constantly. Specifically talking about the Moonfire Fair, you don't even have to do the jump puzzle to actually get the rewards, and that's something I actually want to talk about in an entirely separate video that may come up again depending on the questions we have here later. That's the main reason. And also I feel like when it's a limited time, it somewhat creates the desire for them to maybe improve or do something different the following year, while still including the events that they've already done. For example, last year with Halloween, the Halloween event itself wasn't exactly very in-depth, but they made sure to include the thing they'd already done from the year prior that was so successful. So it just makes each year, hopefully the events get better, or they take the thing they've already done and improve on it a little bit. That's what I'm actually kind of hoping to see with the Halloween event this year. I have no doubt that the Haunted House will return, but I want to see some sort of update to it. What that update is, I'm not 100% certain yet, and I hope they continue to update and improve on the things that people enjoy, because I've seen tons of people doing the Moonfire Fair. I've seen them all doing the jump puzzle, and there's plenty of people who won't touch it at the same time. And I feel like they could structure certain things better, so I don't think they should be lost forever, but it is nice to have these like occurrences that pop up at certain points of the year for the players that are always looking to have something new to do in the game. Question number 3. Buenas tardes, Senor Hache. Hello to you too. Last week you touched on your interest in delving further into Garlemald and watching the looming civil war unfold, as well as your disinterest in seeing Alamigo become our home base for 5.0. It's got me thinking, however, about the possibility of a full-scale Empire counterattack on the Eorzean Alliance in some kind of loony Ashen calamity that could reshape a Realm Reborn areas a la Cataclysm. The engine for 14 is much more sophisticated. The reworking of certain areas would prove more difficult. It also breathed new life into a consistently lifeless areas in a Realm Reborn. Knows maybe they could even manage the elimination of classes. So the thing that you mentioned and the elimination of classes are 2 completely different things, so we should probably leave those, make those, you know, exclusive to each other and not really try to combine them all into one thing. The big thing with reworking lower level areas is it's all about, it's not so much about reworking the, how do I describe this? It's not so much about reworking the old areas just to get people in them. At least on the more populated servers, hunts generally at least somewhat keep people in the older zones, and you always have new players coming up and doing the levels if they're not using things like jump potions. The main thing you have to consider is that if you rework all the old areas, you also have to consider the effect that has on the Realm Reborn story, which now means you need to almost not really rewrite all of a Realm Reborn. You either need to instance out all the Realm Reborn areas so that when you hit a certain point they evolve, as opposed to them being the way that they are permanently, or you need to rewrite the entire way that the Realm Reborn story is done. The big thing with Cataclysm is when all the old zones were reworked, so were the ways that you were introduced to those areas. It was basically as if you were a brand new player and you created your character in that era, that was the era your character was kind of advancing through. If we did that in Final Fantasy XIV, it'd be the equivalent of erasing 2.0 and everything that happened there, or making it so that it was such an old occurrence, it was no longer a relevant plot point to the point where they don't even explain it in the story, which would mean you'd have to worry about all the dungeons and why people are going through them. You have to rewrite why people go through all those dungeons. And I also noticed that my question is not centered at all, so I'm gonna fix that now. And that's a whole heap and hell of a lot of problems. I agree with the idea we don't need to necessarily rework old areas from the ground up, but there are absolutely things that you can do activity-wise. For example, not making treasure maps exclusive to only the new areas. You know, it sucks that all the old treasure maps are exclusive to the old areas, the Heavensward ones are exclusive to the Heavensward areas. That's one thing to consider. Also, maybe revisiting old hunts and giving them a little bit more life. They seem adverse to doing this because it's just they want to focus on the new hotness, you know? But at some point, you do have to go back and revisit the areas. I just don't think it's via a Cataclysm-esque event or a calamity that leads to doing that. I think it just becomes, hey, we need to do this out of necessity, but we want to make sure the experience is the way that it's sort of still intended to be throughout 2.0 through 2.5. All right, question number 4. Hi, Mr. Happy. How you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. My question to you refers to the future jobs for 5.0. According to Square Enix, they only want to bring 2 jobs per expansion. If I remember correct. I don't think they necessarily said that's what they wanted to do. They more so just said that doing 3 was an insane amount of work. It takes about a year from concept to completion to finish an entire job. So that doing 3 when there's only 2 years between the expansions means that there's a lot of extra resources being devoted to them. So that's kind of like the soft way of saying, you know, we kind of want to aim for 2. I think this time they should bring a tank and a healer and no DPS. Some of my friends do not like the idea so much. However, I find that would fix problems such as the DPS balancing and that there are not enough tanks and healers. What do you think? So keep in mind that when you add new jobs into the game, and this has already been proven through Heavensward, and I do trust their information, although I just don't agree with their outlook on it. By adding a new tank and a healer, you don't necessarily increase the number of players who play tank and healer, and if you do, you don't necessarily do it by very much. Those jobs fall into a degree of responsibility that just isn't there for DPS, and there's an added degree of stress that a lot of players just don't want to deal with. Especially with the way that Final Fantasy XIV is designed, where tanks and healers are not just tanks and healers. You know, they need to be able to maximize their GCDs and be able to output some damage in a lot of more serious endgame content. So generally, if you're not a player who's playing on that cutting edge level and you're playing those roles, it's generally just because you enjoy the fantasy of the job and you don't necessarily mind the responsibility. But people who actively want to avoid the responsibility of tank and healer, adding new ones doesn't really make them go over to that role. Warrior is probably the one job that over the years, one of the OGs, that's been the job that's gotten people to maybe try out tank. And that's just because of the community, I guess, outlook on the job as a whole, as a, you know, more direct blue DPS, especially with inner release changes. So I do agree, a tank and a healer, just because we haven't had one in... If they don't add one here, it'll have been 4 years since adding either one of those roles. Can you get away without doing that? You can technically. DPS is the most played role, and not just because there are the most DPS. There are the most DPS jobs because that's the demand. The demand for that role and the number of people who play it is much higher than the other roles. So, but I do think you do kind of need it. And even your guesses, Blue Mage, Geo, they're high on my list in terms of guesses, including tank as Blue Mage and Geo as a healer. Those are just very high on my guesses, but I just don't think it's specifically for the reason. I don't necessarily agree with the reason why you think it needs to be added. And I don't think it helps with any of the things that you've suggested, but I do think it is the thing that is most likely. Question number 5. Hey, Mr. Happy, longtime listener, first time caller. No, wait, dude, imagine if I did calls for this. I would not be able to handle it on a personal level. Question's pretty simple, really. I've been watching you play 14 for years. I can't help but wonder if your love for the game is the same as it was during A Realm Reborn. Do you still feel the desire to wake up in the morning and play the game because you want to, or is it an obligated feeling of you get when you have to go to work? So my big thing is, with my career, obviously it was built on Final Fantasy XIV. That was the game that launched my YouTube channel. It's the game that launched my Twitch channel. It's a game that I still spend a pretty fair amount of time playing. What's happened over the years is when you play a game so much over so many years, and this even happened to me with Final Fantasy XI, you realize you really don't need to necessarily log in every day or be on all the time. And it took me a while before I hit that point, but probably towards the middle point to the near end point of Heavensward, I hit that. And it helped that they started designing things to be, I guess, a little bit more quality of life, or they started approaching a wider audience, such as with the final tier creator of Alexander being more geared towards people who, you know, I'd probably say like closer to 20 to 25% of the community, as opposed to like the 5% of the community that the previous 2 raid tiers had been focused on. Now, with Ultimate being focused on kind of the top 1-2%, and with our current Savages still being the 20-25%, on top of me just being someone who likes to see at least most of the stuff, generally crafting and gathering stuff other than beast tribes I tend to avoid, but I like to at least see everything. I just make sure that I binge on it really hard when something new comes out, and I accept that I'll get my couple hundred hours out of whatever it is I want to do, and then I have time to look at other games. Sometimes I want that and sometimes I don't. Like during this August, I've kind of wished that Pagos was a little more successful, because I'd like to be sinking my teeth into that. I did Onimos for like a week and a half, 2 weeks straight, and I never really stopped and said, oh, you know, I don't really need to do this anymore. Again, that's, if you watch my Pagos video, I explain a lot more about, I guess, why I felt that way kind of in Onimos. But I'm just a lot more measured about it now. You know, I take what I can, I see what I need to do, and then I make time for other things. That's really kind of what's happened. I still have that love for the game. To answer the question directly, I still have that love for the game, but I'm far more measured about it now than I was years ago, where I was a raving lunatic about it. So take that however you will, but that's my answer. Question number 6. Hi, Haps. Hello. Hope you're having a good weekend. Have some freshly baked sugar cookies. I want some sugar cookies. I like sugar cookies. Okay, I did have a good weekend, by the way. Stormblood's looking to head towards Garlemald and possibly throwing us there in 5.0. As much as everyone is excited, I'm wondering if we'll get to visit the Chilean Island, the Trade Island sitting in the mid-ocean, or even Mrhappy, where I would love to go. What do you think? Do you think we'll see more of the world? I think it's inevitable that as we see more expansions, there's plenty of areas that are unvisited. A lot of them I expect to either experience via 24-mans, dungeons, or through an expansion overall. Mrhappy is a big question mark, because the continent of Mrhappy is to the south. And as far as we know, it's a desolate wasteland. But we also know other things about it, such as it being the land that the Makote, they migrated from there, for example. So there are origins there that need to be explored. We also have the New World, which is almost kind of hinted to be unofficially like a Vana'diel type of thing. Mostly because the Mammal Jaw comes there. There's some items that come from the New World that resemble Final Fantasy XI items. So it's not like it's not actually Vana'diel. It's confirmed that, you know, the realms of 11 and 14 are completely separate and are not in any way intertwined. However, there's a lot of guessing about what is actually in the New World, and if and when we'll actually get to go see it. It's a big question mark, because we don't know where the Ascians are taking us after Garlemald, because it's a huge continent we have to discover. A whole nother continent, just like with Authored. And Authored we didn't even get to see everything of, and a huge chunk of it's actually, again, going to be a dungeon in the form of the Burn. So there's a lot of questions unanswered. I think we are destined to go see these places eventually. It's just a question of why are we going there and when. And I don't think it's going to be for quite some time. And some of those other areas I think we will see a little bit sooner, but I do expect also, again, some of them to be dungeons or 24 minutes. All right, question number 7. Greetings again, Mr. Happy. Hello. Apologies for the absurdly long post without any real question last week. The original question was innovating and refreshing the stale tab target MMO genre, which does not have anything to do with the fact that my beard is way too long and my mustache is getting into my mouth, but was kind of unanswerable. So here's a food question. I like food questions. I very recently had chicken and waffles for the first time. Nice. And was mostly unimpressed. You're dead to me. I still find that that extreme of a combination between sweet and savory is a bit weird. You may seem to be a savory over sweet person. I seem that way, but oh man, give me a box of Raisinets and I'll want 8. Anyway, have you ever had something like chicken and waffles? Of course. And what's your take on the mixture of sweet and savory? Sweet and savory works at times. It's a really tough thing because, like, there's so many foods that are sweet and savory that don't work for some people and do work for a lot of people. Generally, the idea is if you are more of a sweet than a savory person, then the combination works a lot better. These are also the same people that generally like pineapple on pizza. It's not necessarily that you like the combination of flavors. It's that you love sweet. You love like that sweet, sugary flavor so much that it completely bypasses, I guess, kind of what you're eating it with. And this is, in my opinion at least, kind of common with anyone who likes really weird foods. It's usually because they like one type of flavor so much to the extreme, or their palate prefers that type of flavor so much to the extreme that they just do really weird combinations. I know when I was young, because I have an affinity to savory and, believe it or not, sour. Sour is one of my favorite flavors to deal with, so I'm someone who very regularly, you know, has things that are citrusy or over sour. For example, I have right here, I have mega sour balls. I just have them. I just wanted them, so I bought them. They're so dangerous to eat. These are so sour. You eat 2 of them in a day, you won't be able to feel your mouth for 2 days. I know from experience, because it came with a warning, I ignored it, and then I basically couldn't eat for 2 days because anything that touched my tongue just, it was like there was no skin there to protect it from being overly sensitive. But I still love these things and I'll still eat them. So, for example, I'm someone who would just drink pickle juice, for example, because it's sour and it's pungent, and it's not like it's a great flavor, but it's just something I have an affinity towards. And that's just how food is, kind of. You know, people have different palates, people have different preferences. And if you don't like something, it doesn't mean you're the devil like I may have implied earlier, but you're different. That's it. So I like chicken and waffles, but maybe you don't. Question number 8. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hello. I'm a longtime viewer and first time asking a question. If you like, I would gladly take out your family for vacation and dinner, and you may bring the kid. Oh, he can't go fucking nowhere. He'll be a goddamn disaster. I'll pay for the plane. Really do enjoy everything you made and soon making. Makes me learn and understand things I couldn't before, so help me decide. So thank you and keep it up. I will do my best, Silver. Obviously, the start of the video kind of talks about that a little bit, but I'll do my best. Question 1. But there's only one question. Did you edit this and like delete a question? It just says question 1, so I'm gonna take it. Why is Peloton spammed and seems to be, quote, viable? For context, mostly in dungeons, short content that is mobs right around the corner. So a lot of the times when it comes to Peloton, as of right now, we only have a choice of 5 role actions. Obviously, when we have 10, you won't really have to choose it, and you won't have to wonder if it's necessarily viable. But some people just want to make things as fast as possible. Dungeons are a major thing where you really don't need a super specific skill set to get through them in the fastest way possible. Lowering that runtime between trash packs makes, you know, at least several seconds of a difference when you're constantly going through the dungeon, depending on how often people are even sprinting in the first place. So that's the main reason. It's just people want to get places a little faster when they're not in combat, and that's exactly what Peloton is used for. So I always welcome it. If someone's using it, then great. I'll just make use of it, and I'll get to the place I need to go a little bit faster, and there's nothing more to it. Question number 9. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hello. First time asking a question, so I want to start off by saying thank you for all the content you create. Really enjoyed it. It helped me a lot. I'm glad you enjoy it. So, sorry, I had to do it. So with 5.0 expansion expected next year, I've been reflecting a little bit about job skill additions and changes that were made for Stormblood, what to expect for 5.0. I guess it's safe to say with the expansion, we'll get a new level cap, and we'll get new skills along the way. However, adding new skills just for the sake of having more buttons to press doesn't seem ideal, especially if you're a controller player. I actually think controller players have it a little bit easier. Having done the Healer Happy series, I find that my access to buttons is a little easier on controller than it is on PC. I don't find the need for things like an MMO mouse when I'm playing on controller, because I don't have necessarily the dexterity to use the buttons that are on my keyboard in a way that makes as much sense. So at times I definitely prefer keyboard and mouse, like overall, but at times controller does seem actually the more ideal option when they're adding a lot of buttons, but it depends on how you're using the controller. Especially if you're okay. So in Stormblood, they took away or changed skills at lower levels. Taking away skills at lower levels can make the jobs feel somewhat incomplete when level synced. Do you have any hopes or expectations how they'll treat this in 5.0? So one of the biggest things people talk about is the idea of making it so you keep all your skills when you sync down. I'm not necessarily against the idea, but I do see the struggles with newer players playing with veteran players, like a tank that has, you know, a level 28 gladiator that has almost none of his skills, playing against the level 80 synced down black mage who has all of his skills. And how do you determine what is the right potency for these skills? Do you just make them so weak that there's no chance of pulling aggro? In which case, do you really feel good about having your full rotation? On top of that, a lot of the problems becomes you have so many GCDs and buffs and things like that, that even if you were to make the potencies too low, like there's issues that come with it that would, if they could find a sweet spot somehow to make that work, that would probably be my ideal solution. As for the actual trimming down of skills, I do think we're due for probably another trimming down of skills, but more importantly, I think they really need to rework role actions. You know, role actions in theory were a good idea, but they ended up just taking the things that, a lot of things you felt like you absolutely needed, and just put them into this optional slot where you just have, you know, 5 optional ones, and most of them end up feeling like, man, I really remember when I had these and I didn't have to choose whether or not I wanted them. That's going away when they make it 10 role actions, and I think we are probably going to see that system expanded upon a little bit more, where some of the skills you have on your job now end up, more of them even going into the role action, so that they all don't feel like they're absolutely mandatory to be using. I don't know. I'm sure they have something planned. I just can't really imagine what it is, because this is a game that just has so many skills, and reworking the lower levels just ends up feeling like crap. So more traits is an option. Obviously skills that branch is another option. People always talk about making it like the PvP skills, which I think is a little too mundane, but I guess if you make it so that what you're doing outside of your GCDs is so engaging that your main GCDs don't really need to be that engaging, then maybe. But there's a lot of possibilities. Unfortunately, I don't have one that's I'm 100% confident in, just because I can't. This is not my expertise. Let's just say that. Question number 10. Hey, Mr. Happy. Hello. This might come across as more of a rant, but I was wondering if you think Yoshi P and the dev team will ever show some more love to Final Fantasy VIII fans by giving us some much overdue fan service. Final Fantasy titles such as 3, 5, 6, 8, 12 have had entire alliances or raid tiers, while others like 7 and 9 have had many of their iconic bosses and summons incorporated into the game. Despite being one of the highest selling and most popular games in the series, the only Final Fantasy VIII fan service has been a triple triad and a squall glamour that received being subbed for 4 years. I hope Final Fantasy VIII would finally get some much needed representation in the current raid story, if it was, as it was one of the games where Omega appeared. So just to be clear, Omega and Omega Weapon are not the same thing. Omega is a being, a transdimensional being that that goes between dimensions, specifically on its hunt for Shinryu. That is what Omega is. Omega Weapon is literally just, hey, we wanted to make a weapon, we have Ultima and that. So, like, Omega Weapon is not the same thing as Omega. So just to be clear, that's the main reason why the Interdimensional Rift, which is based on Final Fantasy V's Omega, is completely unrelated to the Omega Weapon of Final Fantasy VIII. So, with that being said, why is there no Final Fantasy VIII? I think it's just because of the type of fantasy world Final Fantasy VIII takes place in. It's not very friendly until we go to Garlemald in terms of actual references. And I think there are more references than what you've suggested. I know, for example, Brothers, while I guess not exclusively Final Fantasy VIII, I'd say most people affiliate it with Final Fantasy VIII. They've appeared in Pagos, most recently, for example. Although you would also argue that those are more based on the Final Fantasy XI encounter with the brothers, where they're actually just Minotaurs, or they're actually just Taurus-style monsters, as opposed to the older brother and the younger brother for the Minotaurs. But I do think that 5.0 is the time for Final Fantasy VIII. I think that the type of technology that's used in Final Fantasy VIII, and obviously Final Fantasy VII as well, Garlemald just lends itself to a lot of those things. You know, the floating gardens where, you know, students are turned into soldiers, you know, things like that. I can imagine that not the Popularis, I can never remember both the names of the units for the in the Civil War or in the in Garlemald itself. The ones that we're trying to ally ourselves with, I can imagine them having a unique unit called Seed, where they're training a younger generation of Garleans to, you know, try to overthrow the main thing, especially with an Ascian, or, you know, I guess a warlock in a sense. Not really a witch like Idea, but, you know, I can imagine that being a parallel drawn to that. One of the big things that we spoke about on, I think it was one of the State of the Realms, was the idea that the Deep Siege Research Facility would make for a pretty good deep dungeon. And then, of course, you have not really a lot of bosses to draw from for that, but as an area, that's another thing for you to look to. And I mean, people talk about gunblades. You know, gunblades are a big thing in Garlemald. So I feel like if there's a time for it, 5.0 is the time. I feel like Final Fantasy VIII just lends itself towards that. One thing I've been waiting to see is Pandemonium. Actually, a really subtle summon in that game, but kind of like a secret favorite of mine. I always really liked Pandemonium and what the idea behind Pandemonium was. And I very much affiliate it with Final Fantasy VIII on a personal level. So that's, for me, that would be one. I'm down for that. Question number 11. Hey, apps, this current event makes me want Spider-Man as a job. Yoshida had a Spider-Man shirt on, so don't say it can't happen. Just kidding. Looking forward to that game, by the way. So let's see. We've got 3 questions to choose from. Fuel for the RMT Hunt, Blue, Red, and Violet. Oh, actually, I think I know what that's about. I think that's about the Estinian Tales from Stormblood. I kind of want to take that one here. Well, sort of, it's not. But what do you think 5.0's title will be? Purple Haze or Purple Rain? I don't think it'll be either. I do think it'll literally just be the same format we've had for, like we've had Storm Blood, we've had Heaven's Word, so, you know, it's not Heaven's Ward, it's Heaven's Word, like we're going there. So something that's like short and sweet around that area. I don't think we're going to get a multi-word expansion title. And whatever it is, it's likely to do with thunder, lightning. There's also the other possibilities. Estinian's recent Tales from the Stormblood, at the end it talks about blue skies, you know, I think a crimson blood. And then it specifically mentions like the black of the north or something like that, which you'd ironically... Yeah, there's a few things that says, and it could actually be a little bit of a teaser towards the title. Obviously, Gaius is the Black Wolf, so we are looking towards him as a potential kind of contender for, I guess, what that's teasing with Estinian. But more so is that the Ascians now have their grip in Garlemald. You know, the most powerful nation in the world now has... The Ascians have a firm grip. They even have the body of one of the most feared and respected individuals in the entire empire, one of the most insane ones in the entire empire. So the fact that the emperor himself is playing into their hands a little bit does... Maybe the violet isn't so much the problem. Maybe it is that darkness that's being mentioned there. So we have to look towards something short and sweet, something that either has to do with violet or darkness. But what it is, I mean, there's no way to possibly guess. Question number 12. Hey, Mr. Happy. Been a while since I've wrote a question, so I think I'll try to make it an interesting one. Well, two. Sorry if the first one's kind of long. First, the addition of Eureka and Diadem, we have seen new open areas added to the game, which I understand takes time to develop, but do you think it would be beneficial to add new zones in patches for the sake of the main story? For example, it's not happening because it's a dungeon, just add the burn as an explorable location. So I'll tackle that from kind of a development standpoint. So when you develop a brand new zone, you generally won't just do it for one reason. You need to make sure that zone gets as much mileage out of its gameplay as possible. So new main story quest. Okay, that's one thing that you can absolutely do in there. And I think that's the most obvious thing to do with it. Then you have to consider you probably need hunts for there. So you need 2 B ranks, 2 A ranks, and an S rank. Okay, so you need to get those monsters, you need to determine what they're going to do, and then make sure they're in line with the previous rewards. Treasure maps, you know, you need to make sure there's treasure maps there. You also need to design every fate for the area, which probably isn't the worst. Probably the hardest thing about designing fates is A, picking where they exactly go in the map so they're positioned correctly, and B, writing the puns around them. So honestly, probably the 2 hardest things about that. You also have to consider, do we have a dungeon entrance in here? The answer is probably yes. Do we have any sort of hub? Are we planning on doing daily quests in here? So there's a lot that needs to be planned out, and I think that if they're doing it for Eureka, it is probably why they wouldn't do it for the story itself. And that goes for Diadem as well. If they're going to put all this effort into a new zone, they'd probably rather create a new content around it. I'll use that in quotes, new content around it, as opposed to just making it a functional zone. That does all the same things, because the game's not really about the open world. The game is about these structured instances, or instances that at least are separated from those open world areas. So it's I mean, it's a tough call. It's not that they can't do it, it's that it's where their focus would rather be, considering the amount of resources it takes. And second, I'm looking for a gaming desktop. Well, generally my best advice is get some advice from from just like a friend that you have, whether it be online, around you, about parts. You know, obviously I'm not going to sit here and go over parts with you, and then just go down to like a local like Micro Center or a Fry's, or just like a local electronics store that does builds. And if you're confident you can build them yourself, honestly, building a PC is literally like just plugging things in. That's all it is. It's literally plug this in, plug that in, and then there's a few things you just got to be careful that you don't, you know, touch the wrong way, or, you know, make sure you're not like static electricity is flowing through or anything. But it's a pretty easy process. I've built a few computers, and it's not too bad. But if you don't want to do that, then just either pay one of those places to build it. But if you buy it online and you don't, you know, then you have to worry about shipping, and then if it doesn't work, you have to ship it back, and you don't really know if you can take it to any local shops, because it depends on what kind of build that you have. And there's a whole heap and headache of problems if you get one online, as opposed to just buying the parts individually and either building it yourself, having a friend build it, or having a local hardware store build it, or a local electronics store build it. I guess if you were to absolutely be 100% convinced, I'll tell you right now, Cyberpower PC screwed me. I just picked one of their defaults, and it had a custom loop for the cooling, and therefore they're the only ones who can fix it. It broke twice in 4 months, and I just got tired of it. I gave it to a friend, and I said, listen, if you can fix it, it's yours, and I didn't care. And then, but the one I got from iBuyPower, I actually still have right here. I don't use it anymore, but I have it like as a real emergency backup right here. Theirs worked really well. I know a few other people that have iBuyPowers, but I mean that's probably going to be your last resort. And if you've got like an insane budget, then go with like an Origin, because they're really good with their builds. So if you've got a lot of money and you really don't want to go to a local store, then it's probably Origin. Question number 13. Hey, Mr. Happy, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Have a bonus of those things you like. I like those things. Thank you. So having played through Final Fantasy VI over the weekend, one of the best ones, how would you feel about having some turn-based combat implemented in 14? So, okay, you know what, let me read the rest before I get into this, because I already know what my answer is. Whether that's a new version of a Deep Dungeon, a 5.0, or something in the Gold Saucer, since 14 is a theme park, paying homage to the previous titles, turn-based combat has been a staple of the genre until moving into the later titles. So an example would be having a group of 4 players, where each class has a set list of iconic spells to use in each encounter rather than all the spells you would in a typical dungeon, as well as an amount of potions, elixirs, phoenix sounds. Just wondering whether or not you think this could be a good addition. I know they spoke of looking to allow previous FF titles to be played, and that was actually where I was going to go with that. So I don't think developing that type of content specifically for 14 is a good idea. When people purchase an MMO, they purchase it with the idea that this is like the general idea that this is what I'm purchasing. You know, I'm purchasing a tab target MMO that has, you know, content updates every 3.5 months. You know, it's got dungeons, it's got stories, it's got raids, it's got open world hunts, it's got these treasure maps. And you look at all those features and they still kind of fit within what Final Fantasy 14 is. Almost every time they've kind of like tried to create an experience that isn't that experience, it's always been either half-assed or just not really something that's designed for the longevity of the game. And I'm not talking about changing rules in places like Palace of the Dead or Eureka. I'm talking about things like the Chocobo racing, things like the Gold Saucer mini games. It's just stuff like that. It's not that they're necessarily bad additions, but they're not key gameplay features. And what ends up happening with that is you can't just make this completely different style of game be mandatory for any sort of progression in the game. So what do you end up having? You have something that that either has to be for something that's just glamour, or you have something that's just an homage and it's nothing more. And for some things that works okay. Things like, for example, the cheap dungeon, which is pretty funny. It's not really core. It was part of an event. Jump puzzles are the same thing. You know, platforming is kind of like a basic gaming necessity. There's a reason why Mario has been successful all these years. Mario's got better platforming than we do, but that's why they can get away with that in certain places, and it's kind of okay as a niche thing. For turn-based combat, if you are not going full balls to the wall, creating a complete experience, it will not, just like most of the other things, it just won't live it down. I think their best play is making it so you can log into the game and play the other Final Fantasy games. Now, obviously, that's also kind of stupid, because why would I not just play it on my computer without logging into Final Fantasy 14? You know, unless I can get it cheaper or it's like included in my sub somehow, which I doubt that would ever happen. You probably have to buy them separately. And then on top of that, can I play them anywhere and then like save before I go into a dungeon, or do I have to play them at my toy box? Like, there's a whole heap and hell of a lot of problems that comes to developing something like that. But if they're going to do something, I think their best play is to just include the Final Fantasy game, the other Final Fantasy games, the old turn-based ones in the game itself, as opposed to creating this brand new thing that honestly is never going to live up to what people want it to be anyway. And the final question here on the forum's end of the video. Oi, from the Netherlands. Yeah, oi, oi, or hoy, I guess. I quite fancy playing some of the Final Fantasy mobile games on iOS, however, I'm stuck not knowing the best to play, as I know some of them are either straight up bad or pure cash grabs. As I know you've played a few of them, I'm hoping you can point me in the right direction. So I'll go with a few. I already know which one is the #1 recommended one I want to go with. So the Star Ocean game that just came out, I've heard pretty decent things about. You have some of the more obvious ones. Final Fantasy Record Keeper is a classic and still gets updated, but it has some insane power creep. But they constantly update it to make it a little bit new player friendly at the same time. You have Brave Exvius. I'm not a big fan of unit gotchas. That it's just not something I enjoy. However, that game has a cult following and has plenty of people with lots of advice about it on the internet. On top of that, you have Mobius, which is a very powerful story-centric gameplay that has, I guess, more fleshed out, I guess, fan service to the older games. You know, having full-on storylines with people like Cloud, Sephiroth, Tidus, things like that. And then you have my personal favorite, which is Final Fantasy, Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. The main reason why I like Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, I feel like it's the least cash grab of them that I've played. Mainly because there's no stamina system for most of the game. You can play through all the story quests and farm them either for levels or materials as much as you want with no stopping point. There is stamina in the World of Illusion, but every time you get 10 character levels, it resets to maximum. And also, that's not really as vital for character progression as most of the other stuff is. Multiplayer is a big thing in that, you know, you need to do a lot of multiplayer to get some of the more advanced stuff and to get a lot of the rewards. And you can only host 5 of those a day without paying a little extra, but you can join as many people as possible, which is really all you need to be able to do to get all the rewards. Anyway, you need to get all the goals as the hosted person once, and then it's all just join as many as you want without paying a dime and without having any limitations. I feel like it's probably the game that that kind of holds me best. I will say this though, that if you do decide to spend money on it, it is one of the most expensive. I think Record Keeper was my old most expensive one. I think Opera Omnia is now my most expensive one if you actually want to do the gachas. But you can generally just get tons of gems, save up gems for big banners or banners that you specifically want. And if you get the item, then you're usually okay for a pretty long time. You know, you don't have to be one of those whales that spends a ton of money on the game in order to make progress. So Opera Omnia, Dissidia Opera Omnia is a very good one. I know some people would definitely recommend Fire Emblem Heroes. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like its gacha. I don't like the game itself, or at least the simplified version of the gameplay on the mobile game. And I don't know much about the Star Ocean one, but I know some people who have recommended that one my way as well. But anyway, that's all the questions over on the forums. Again, we don't have any Twitch questions this week, so we're just going to wrap up right here, right now. So anyway, thank you for supporting the channel. Again, all of our patrons, all of you who watch this every week, I appreciate it a lot, especially with these rough times that I've been having on a personal note over the past few weeks at this point. Well, probably since about mid-July, I'd say is most accurate. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap. If you want to ask a question for Mondays with Mr. Happy, do it in the description of the video. The description of the video has a link to a forum. You go there, you ask the question, I answer it, and bada bing, bada boom, we good. Anyway, I'm going to go get this rendered, and I'm going to go put some food in my stomach. So thank you, everyone, for watching again. I will see all of you next week, where hopefully we've had some adjustments to Pagos, and we have some more positive things to say in that week. But anyway, I'll see you guys next time. And until then, take care.